Story 1. Let us enforce the emoluments clause first against accepting $400 million planes and running meme coin rug pulls. Story 2. Include real estate other than their primary home and one property in Washington, D.C. These must be liquidated. Their liquid assets are held in United States Treasury bonds for the term of office. Story 3. They made Jimmy Carter sell his peanut farm, but now Donald Trump is allowed to sell his own line of phones. Story 4. I would say if you are running for public office, you are choosing to make yourself public. That should include your financial investments as well. I would also say that any previous financial holdings should be locked within an inviolable trust that is not accessible while holding public office. Any investments that generate revenue should also be placed in that trust for the duration. When you can buy influence with capital, that is when oligarchs rise. Story 5. I hate this subreddit so much. What do you think about the thing that the left would obviously love but the right would obviously hate? What is your reaction to the current news item? Trump did an action. How do you feel about that? This subreddit has become a repost factory of r/news. Will someone post something actually interesting or that will spur good conversation? Or are we just going to let the karma farming spin Dr. Bots continue to kill this website? Story 6. Put all their assets into treasury bills or bonds. Tie their returns to the economy. No asset transfer retroactive to 2 years before they announce their candidacy. They keep their primary residence and have public housing in Washington, District of Columbia. Story 7. I think it is a bare minimum. We should require them to live among us in the poorest neighborhoods with comparable income and comparable health care. Their children and grandchildren, if they are elderly like most of our so-called leaders, should attend local public schools, ride the bus, eat the school lunch, and be frisked at the metal detector. The reason they do not serve us is that they have no stake in our situation. By making them part of our community, there would be major reform. Story 8. That term limits are the most practical reforms that could be implemented to salvage what is left of our republic. Story 9. Blind trust would be acceptable as well. Alternatively, only allow index funds. It should not be like Donald Trump running the government to benefit his businesses or poor, unqualified congresswomen becoming overnight millionaires. Looking at you, Lauren Boebert. Story 10. I believe it is absolutely necessary. There is the emoluments clause for a good reason. We need to know that our elected officials cannot be bought and paid for. Story 11. This should happen immediately along with the suspension of the idea that corporations are treated as people and therefore can donate to political campaigns. For the people, by the people. Story 12. Even better, they have to invest in the Standard & Poor's 500 so their personal wealth is tied to growth as a whole. Story 13. Better idea. Make politicians' trades instantly public. If they can trade stocks based on inside information, we should be able to do the same. Story 14. It's a good idea, but the primary problem is the network of lobbying and special interests that exists in Congress. Even if they are not making money from external sources, they still have contacts and friends in various industries, which tend to influence their actions. I am actually quite partial to the way Singapore handles this, but it is a controversial method. Singapore pays its top government officials very high salaries, some as much as $1 million a year. This reduces any real incentive to seek money from other sources. Additionally, because civil service is highly paid, the type of people who enter government changes drastically. In the United States, politicians are usually already wealthy or successful, or those who have built extensive connections in government with notable exceptions. In Singapore, government officials are technocrats. The most successful and talented individuals in each generation compete fiercely for positions in the civil service. They do not pursue external income sources or network with lobbyists because that would hurt their chances of gaining entry and outperforming the competition. The result is that Singapore is essentially free of corruption. If it were up to me, I would probably triple or quadruple the salaries politicians receive and consider linking their pay to approval ratings. Of course, this would be very unpopular with the American public. Story 15. I think they should be allowed to invest in the 3 major indexes so they still have a reason to grow the broad economy. I do not think they should be able to buy individual stocks. I also think this should extend to immediate family. Story 16. If you only want unsuccessful people to be in government, that is a great idea. However, anyone with assets would be unwilling to unload them, effectively removing themselves from the pool of available candidates, leaving only people without assets. That means either young people without much experience, older people who have not had many opportunities, or simply those who have not been successful. None of those options sound like great leaders. Keep in mind, 60% of Americans have retirement savings plans, and asking them to divest from these plans seems unreasonable. The opportunity cost of not owning stock for 4 years could be 100% growth. That would be a strong no from anyone with investments. Blind trust requirements are much easier to implement, but America has been unwilling to even make that a requirement. Story 17. Rank and file federal employees are required to recuse themselves from decisions that a reasonable person might perceive as a conflict of interest. If I worked at the Food and Drug Administration and was approving a new drug but held stock in that drug maker or a competitor, I should recuse myself from making the decision. If rank and file employees have to do it, the President of the United States and congressional representatives should as well. Years ago, when I worked for the government, I had to have the ethics attorneys approve my attending a friend's wedding. We met when we worked in the private sector, and both he and his wife worked for a company that I regulated. I had known him for 10 years and his wife for 8. They told me what I could and could not do or accept. For example, if it was a cash bar, he could not buy me a drink. Story 18. I totally understand the idea, and I like it in principle. It seems like a simple enough base-level solution to a complex problem. But I also know it has the potential to dissuade many very talented and worthy people from participating. So I am not really sure where I stand on it. Obviously, I want to avoid conflicts of interest and corruption. But I also understand how difficult it would be for someone to give up things they have built, such as businesses and portfolios, in order to run for office. Maybe some kind of freeze could be an in-between solution. I do not know. Story 19. I am a bit mixed. Take one of the classic examples with Nancy Pelosi. She became very wealthy while in Congress. It appears she benefited from her privileged position to make bets ahead of the market. However, it is also true that a significant portion of those investments are in businesses from her district. That is the type of vested interest we generally want our representative officials to have. Story 20. Laws only matter if they are enforced. We are currently not enforcing laws, particularly since a recent Supreme Court decision elevated the president to a de facto king. It is a good idea in theory, but meaningless until enforcement exists again. Story 21. All politicians' investments should be held in a blind trust, and they should not be allowed to own property outside of their principal residence. Too many conflicts of interest exist otherwise. Story 22. They just end up creating a trust and someone else oversees it. They still have the same vested interests because they will get it back the day they leave office. It is completely pointless. I wish there was a way to make it meaningful, though. Story 23. Before taking office, Jimmy Carter put his assets in a trust. Upon leaving office, he discovered that the trustee had bankrupted him. This did not happen. Story 24. If someone wants to become wealthy, politics should not be the way. If a person is already wealthy, they should do something else. Story 25. I think it is fair that they keep what they have while in office. However, they cannot sell or buy until they leave office. Story 26. Public service should never be a path to private profit. If that line becomes unclear, you are no longer serving the people. Story 27. All federal politicians in Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court of the United States should be required to place all of their investments in a blind trust for the duration of their term. Story 28. Show me a politician who makes money by being a politician, and I will show you a crook. So yes, I am all for it. Story 29. What if we allowed and encouraged them to hold stock, but their entire portfolio is public, including buy and sell orders and options trading? That could be fun to watch. Story 30. Not far enough. Many politicians are compromised by the promise of a career after politics. In fact, many enter politics simply to secure that. Furthermore, many of our officials are either plants or transplants from the very industries they regulate, meaning they either start with a future career in the industry or are effectively still working in it. Thus, divesting any material links they have to the industry is worthless. What we need is to sequester all public servants from public contact. There is no need to communicate directly with officials when the internet exists and people post their thoughts in open forums. This also eliminates popularity politics. If politicians are not expected to hobnob with the people, the beer buddy factor disappears. No more lobbyists, no more rallies, no more backroom deals or puppeteering, no more sound bites, no more tabloid photo dissection, no more endless campaigning. Candidates announce, submit a sheet of policy positions subject to updates, and are sequestered immediately. If an official's actions contradict their policy sheet, there is no press release to spin it away. It simply stands as a lie. Contact with officials is a felony. Claiming to know an official's current state of mind is indicative of that felony. That crime is punishable by a sentence equal to the official's tenure, plus a lifetime restraining order from all state and federal departments that serve the public. If officials do not want to be cut off from the public, their family, or normal life, that is fine. There are other jobs in the private sector. We need people more committed to serving the public than themselves. Story 31. This is a tough topic that tends to get oversimplified. First, thanks to our reliance on retirement plan deductions, almost everyone has some form of stock holdings. Second, all politicians receive a flat predetermined salary, with United States Congress members making $174,000 per year. That sounds like a lot, but people often fail to consider that becoming a Congress member requires not only the ability to quit one's day job, but also the risk of being removed at any time by the voting public. That assumes the question is only about the United States Congress. Most politicians, even elected ones, make closer to $30,000 to $50,000 a year. There are two other incentives, beyond money, that attract people to Congress: corruption and power. Ideally, Congress members should desire neither. However, if the job is limited only to people who can afford to completely divest all of their finances for the promise of a salary below what many lawyers and financial officers earn. Remember, the main job of a Congress member should be to draft laws and manage the budget. You will exclude many of the most qualified candidates and replace them with individuals who have already planned to use their position to enrich themselves. There will still be occasional members like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who serve out of genuine love for supporting the people, but those are a fringe minority. As others have noted, we are not yet at a point where Congress members fully adhere to existing rules. A good start would be to prohibit active trading while in office or require establishing a blind trust, and to prohibit members from directly profiting from laws they wrote for several years after leaving office. Story 32. I have two small businesses that I run. They both make less than $5,000 combined, being relatively niche and more about passion than profit. Operating costs are very low since it is just me running them, and most expenses are for materials. I am honestly not sure they would be a concern if I ran for office. Even if they were, I am the only person involved, and they are very niche. One business sells three-dimensional printed or cast fandom novelties, and the other operates an airsoft field. I plan to run once the current climate improves. I would prefer to see actual enforcement of existing regulations and the resealing of rules that have been loosened first. We should definitely hold politicians accountable if they are involved in a company, and I believe more strict rules for larger companies would be reasonable. Story 33. Bring up at the next constitutional convention because that is the only way this is getting fixed at all. Story 34. Transparency should be the status quo and mandatory. They serve their constituents, us, but most of them seem to have conveniently forgotten that. Story 35. I agree that blind trusts provide a more moderate and agreeable middle ground. I have some doubts about policies like this attracting only unsuccessful people, though. On one hand, it could attract very successful individuals who no longer see the pursuit of money as their primary goal in life. On the other hand, it raises the question, what kind of talent do we really want leading us? Is it simply talent for financial success? Story 36. Not interested in divesting? That is fine, but clearly public service is not your thing. Have a nice life. Story 37. This alone will not stop corruption. Donald Trump put his assets into revocable trusts, and his corruption continues without issue. Forcing politicians to do this will not prevent them from finding ways around it. One way they do this now is by promising a job as a lobbyist once they are done in Congress. This practice will continue with or without this proposed idea. Story 38. I think there should be a law requiring citizens to vote. If you do not vote, you receive a fine of $75. In the last election, Donald Trump was elected with 77 million votes, but 91 million people did not vote at all. As far as I am concerned, if you did not vote, you forfeit your right to complain about the administration. Story 39. We should start enforcing the conflict of interest laws we already have first. It is not a bad idea, but we would probably have to compensate elected officials better to make it worthwhile for them. Politics is not exactly attracting the best and brightest, so disincentivizing it further without some kind of offset seems short-sighted. Story 40. I would feel better if we put a limit on all political contributions, banned super political action committees, and rejected special interest funding of advertisements 280 days before the election. I do not really care about their personal assets. Story 41. They can easily give it to a family member. The current president of the United States does this already, and I am sure many politicians around the world do this. My extended family is very high up in Philippine politics, and nepotism is widespread. Story 42. I think it would backfire spectacularly. It would create another barrier to anyone even resembling a normal person getting elected. Do you know how wealthy you have to be to do that and not have it be financially ruinous to you and your family? And if you are extremely wealthy, consider this. Jeff Bezos' salary as chief executive officer of Amazon was $80,000. At that level, you can make the numbers say whatever you need them to. Story 43. I fully support it. I had to do that when I joined the United States Air Force, and a conflict of interest was much less likely there than if I were a politician. Story 44. I would be satisfied if all their investments outside of a checking account were placed in a blind trust that they cannot view or manage except for viewing the balance. Story 45. Double the salaries of current politicians and make it illegal for them to be involved in stock markets. Violations of any kind are punishable by a minimum of 10 years in prison and forfeiture of profits. This will never happen, of course, because they make the rules. Story 46. That's quite a penalty. Buffet would freak out as he believes in buy and hold. The correct solution is to remove access and grant it to a manager with guidance, but no updates during the term plus 6 months. Story 47. I think we should include an Iron Throne, the book-accurate version forged from thousands of sharp swords. Story 48. Based on what the president has done and is still doing, it will not matter at all, at least to one political party. Story 49. Alternative solution. 1. Only candidates whose net worth is less than 15 times the median United States household net worth can hold office. Only individuals can donate, and no more than $1,000 total across all candidates. Tax deductible. All United States citizens are automatically registered to vote. Mail-in or drop-off ranked choice voting for all federal elections. Proportional representation in the Senate as well. Mandatory maximum service time of 40 cumulative years. Whatever limits are imposed on citizens for access to services, the same are imposed on all elected officials, including mandatory drug testing. Mandatory financial disclosure for officials plus their families. Blind trust with stock trade restrictions similar to those applied to insiders. 10. Minimum corruption charges are half the strictest applied to citizens. Story 50. All investments should go into a blind trust that they have no ability to see or influence. The blind trust should be set up before they go into office, and they cannot distribute the trust until after they leave office for a specified period. This prevents immediate re-entry into office. The trustees should be required to be licensed, third-party fiduciaries, and the investment mix should be conservative to maintain principal and income. This approach allows individuals to maintain their freedom to participate in the economy in which they live and have some actual stake, but they have no knowledge of the specific investments. Private holdings that are not equity are more complicated. Should a United States citizen be required to sell a company they built or invested in if they run for office? That is a difficult question. Story 51. I think it should be a requirement. You will never achieve 100% separation, but anything is better than actively profiting or losing based on your political decisions in real time. Story 52. What is the point of anti-corruption laws when many Americans are willing to vote for politicians who are openly corrupt? Story 53. To be honest, it appears to be common sense. You should not profit personally from decisions that have an impact on the economy, industry, or businesses. Serving the public, not your stock portfolio, should be the goal of public service. Story 54. It has long been customary for the president and certain other officials to place all their business affairs into a blind trust upon entering office, and that is a reasonable solution. It should be mandatory for all elected officials. Donald Trump was the first president to violate that. He staged a childishly faked press conference where he pretended to transfer all his businesses to his children, but all the stacks of paper he claimed were the legal documents accomplishing that were blank sheets and letter-sized paper, not legal-sized paper as typical for legal documents. Even that was irrelevant because he overrode the recommendations of security experts and gave his children top-secret clearances, allowing them to attend policy meetings. Story 55. Challenging and strikes me as un-American to force them. That said, I think there are some legal ways in which this can be handled, such as blind trusts, but I am not a lawyer. Story 56. Why just United States politicians? Other places in the world also have to deal with this. The biggest issue is that even if all their assets are frozen, sold, or put in a blind trust, a politician can still push forward policy that is favorable for some individuals or corporations with a simple promise that once their term is over, they will be awarded a nice cushy position or contract. Story 57. Yes. Get illicit money out of politics. Lobbyists should also be stopped. Unfortunately, the people who have the power to make that call are the same people who benefit from it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.